Hi everyone, I'm back with another Last Epoch video, and today I want to talk about advanced crafting strategies. So now that the game has been out for a little bit and people have been blasting to endgame, I'm sure that there are a lot of people that are kind of wondering, like, what should I do? How do they get exactly the right items? And I want to talk about especially those runes and those glyphs, in particular the higher end ones, the more rare ones that you may not actually have used at all, or maybe a few times, and they can either easily ruin an item completely or make it amazing. And if you want to go for those juicy high-end crafts, you kind of need to know what you're doing. So this is what I want to go over. I assume that you know how the basics of the crafting system work. I'm not going to explain forging potential and prefixes and suffixes and stuff like that. So we're going straight in for the high-end stuff. So let's look at my gear a little bit, and just I want to show you a little bit what I got. For example, after playing this character here in particular for like around 100 hours. So you can just like see a little bit like what I managed to create out of this stuff that I found, and then out of the lucky crafts that I have gotten. So there are definitely some really juicy items that you can make, but you have to be kind of smart about some things here. Now, first thing you'll notice is that most of my items actually have a sealed modifier. You see this here, the sealed affix. This is like the 5th affix that goes to the sealed slot. So if you look at the item in here in the crafting window, you can actually see this here on the bottom left. This is the sealed slot. And the way to create these items is by using the Glyph of Despair. So what you need to know about the Glyph of Despair is that, well, it has a chance to seal an affix, and then once that affix is sealed, you can no longer modify it. This is especially useful on exalted items in two particular cases. Number one is there is a mod that you don't like that you try to get rid of. So for example, here we have cold resistance, which is actually okay, but maybe I have another example here. But let's say this was like an undesirable stat, and it just like kind of occupies one of our suffixes here. Cold resistance is a suffix, and well, you have the option to either Glyph of Chaos it and try to randomly roll it into something else. But if you need a specific stat, you really want to have a certain thing, then you can't really rely on Glyph of Chaos most of the time, because on most slots you have a lot of different options that can roll there. This is especially true for prefixes on chests, where you can have like a bunch of these like skill specific affixes. You see here there's like dive bomb right now. There's basically all of the rogue skills. It's a similar for other classes, and kind of the same for the helms. You have also these class skills there and a lot of other class specific affixes. So just like YOLO, chaos, any prefix into something that you actually want basically never happens in these cases. Now this is different in suffixes most of the time, where maybe you're just like trying to fix or resist. In that case, it may not be such a bad idea to just like, chaos a suffix and just trying to get a better resist, or maybe trying to get life. But if you're trying to get the really juicy crafts, most of the time you want to get very specific things. So in my case, for example, I had a tier 6 health roll, and I also really wanted to get increased health on top of that, just to like juice up my character, and I wanted to get rid of the cold. So I put in this thing here, and then we seal the tier 2 cold resistance. Going back to the Glyph of Despair, it has a lower chance to seal the affix depending on how high of a tier the affix is that they're trying to seal. So you cannot do this with tier 5 affixes. Those are locked in, and the only way you have to deal with that is to use the Rune of Removal. So you can do that to try to hit a certain tier 5 that you're trying to get rid of. But if it's not tier 5, then you can try the Glyph of Despair. Now these are kind of rare, especially for merchant skills. You can do prophecies for them on COF, which is not too bad. But in general, you kind of want to be a bit resourceful with these. And in this case, I sealed tier 2. Tier 2 is a pretty good chance. Tier 1 is actually guaranteed on an exalted item that has 4 affixes. So if that was a tier 1 cold resistance, then we could quite easily seal that. I can maybe show another example here. So we have, for example, this pair of boots. And let's say I don't want the health region here. This is a tier 1 health region. This is an exalted pair of boots. And you can do Glyph of Despair and get rid of this thing here, guaranteed. So tier 1 is guaranteed, and then it goes lower and lower chances on higher tiers. But you want to make sure that the item has full affix slots. So 2 prefixes, 2 suffixes, because that raises the chances. From my experience, I have sealed a tier 3 like once. I've never sealed a tier 4. And I do kind of consistently seal tier 2. I think tier 2 on exalted items is something like 65% chance or so to seal. So it's not really bad. It's 2 out of 3. And you can see this here. I have a tier 2 cold res, I have a tier 2 ally res, I have a tier 2 cold res again. So tier 2 does happen, you know, relatively often. Here's also a tier 3 necrotic, for example, on my gloves. So it can do that, and you can also try multiple times. So in case it doesn't seal on first try, the FX will upgrade, and then you can still try it on tier 3, and you can still try it on tier 4, but the chances get lower and lower every time. Now, one problem that comes out of this is that, well, you kind of like spend all of your forging potential, and you may actually spend all of your Glyphs of Despair, and then you also may end up with a tier 5 mod that you don't actually want, and then the item is kind of bricked. You may also get kind of lucky and try to seal as affix that is actually good for you, like in my case with the necrotic res. Necrotic res is nice, and I got a tier 3 necrotic res there. So I think I didn't hit a tier 2, and then I hit the tier 3, and that was actually an upgrade to the item. So if you still have forging potential left and you get lucky with that, then you can actually get something really juicy. And now we have a tier 7, 5, 5, 4, and tier 3 on this thing here, which is completely nuts. Now there is also a different way of sealing affixes, which is the experimental stats. So you have this here, for example, this is like just a pair of boots and has this experimental mod that drops on the mages. And you can guaranteed seal this affix with a Rune of Research. And the good part is here, you can also use this together with a Glyph of Hope to try to preserve the forging potential. But the Rune of Research just gets rid of that seal affix and puts it to another slot. But then you can't put another affix there in the sealed slot. There's only one. It cannot be modified in any way. So once it's there, and you can't put another one. So in case, for example, we have, you know, one of these, bad mods that you want to get rid of on the suffixes, or also another prefix here, for example, you can't seal 2 of them. You can only choose one, and the other one you have to either removal or chaos. But in this case, for example, we have these boots here. They're relatively nice. They have cooldown, they have res, and then, you know, we can maybe, try to, first of all, try this here and see if you can chaos this minion dodge rating away into something good, like movement speed or maybe dexterity or vitality. And in this case, we got attunement. Not really great for a rogue, but could be useful on another class. And now I can say, okay, maybe I want to use this on, like a shaman or something. So let's try to make these boots good. So then we use the Rune of Research, and we get rid of this prefix here. Boom. And now this is sealed, and now we have the open prefix to craft whatever we want. So in this case, on boots, you always want to have movement speed. So we're going to do, movement speed here and craft this up. Now, one thing to see here is also that you want to pay a bit of attention to the forging potential. So you saw just now that this thing had like 30 forging potential left after sealing, which is a relatively good number of forging potential. But you see now I did only a tier 1 and tier 2 craft, and it actually cost quite a lot. I got quite unlucky there. It didn't proc the Glyph of Hope, it didn't proc a critical success, and now we have 15 forging potential left. Now, in a situation like this, you would have to decide a little bit, like, is it actually worth investing those shards? Are you low on certain shards, for example? Are you low on certain glyphs, etc.? And also, what else can you do with the item? So in this case, you see that it already has tier 5 here, tier 6 here, tier 5 there, so it can't really do much more besides just kind of like spamming this movement speed up to tier 5, hopefully. And see if you get those Glyph of Hope procs or the critical success crafts. And we can just try this right now. So here, for example, the Glyph of Hope procced, and now we are at tier 3. And now we do this again, and now we're at tier 4, and we still have 13 forging potential left because it only costs 2 this time. So there's like a pretty large range in RNG and how much forging potential it costs. Now we can also check, for example, what else can we do here. With 13 forging potential left, we could either craft this with movement speed to tier 5, and we could do this in separate ways as well. So you can either try to do this Glyph of Hope craft here and just try to preserve some forging potential and then maybe still reroll the item. Or we could, for example, also say, okay, we're happy with all of the other rolls on the item. We have a mid cooldown roll, we have a perfect attunement roll, and we have a kind of low cold res roll, but let's say we don't really care. We can say, okay, if that movement speed roll was good, right now it rolled minimum, it's 12 out of 14, but if that was good, we could also do Glyph of Order. So this is also something that is like kind of rarely used, but there are those scenarios where you're just about to maybe craft the last affix on the item, and it allows you to preserve the perfection level of the affix basically. So in that case, it has a minimum movement speed roll, and if I upgrade it now, it will be a minimum tier 5 roll. But if it was a maximum roll, it would also become a maximum roll. So this is like one of those little tricks where, especially on some really large range affixes, this can be very helpful. So some examples include, for example, res here, like tier 5 resists in particular, have a really large range. You see here on tier 5 resistances on the void res, we have 30 to 45%. So the maximum is 50% more than the minimum. And if you happen to have a really good like tier 3 or tier 4 res roll or something, and you really want to stack that one res, then this glyph of order actually comes in and allows you to preserve that level of perfection when you upgrade it. But the disadvantage is it costs more forging potential, or at the very least it doesn't have a chance to preserve like the Glyph of Hope. In this case though, because it's a terrible roll, we would do the Glyph of Hope, and it actually procced, so we still have 13 forging potential left. And now we could actually see what we can do with this item. And looking at this here, well, we have perfect attunement, we have perfect movement speed, we have an okay cooldown roll, and as I said, we don't care about cold res. So now we could decide what else to do with this item. And this would be, for example, the reroll, the Rune of Refinement, or the Rune of Shaping. So in this case, we want to look at, okay, what is our best hope of success here? What can we actually still get? And if you look at this here, then you can see that the implicits are actually kind of bad. You see this here cut off at the top on the right. There's increased movement speed. It's 16, which is 15 to 18, and the effect of haste is only 28. So you can try to maybe increase that now. So again, we use the Glyph of Hope to preserve, and we would do the Rune of Shaping here to reroll the implicits, and let's see what we get. We actually preserved it. We got 17% movement speed, and we got 43% effect of haste. And in this case, we still have forging potential left, but I think the chances of success of improving this are not really great. So this is it for this item, I would say. So there's nothing really any more to do, because if I roll this now, I have a really high chance to actually just like run out of forging potential, and the roll is relatively solid all around. Now it can get a little bit more interesting than that though when you use, for example, this item here. So we have another pair of boots here. This has a cooldown roll on the Exalted mod, and then it has attunement, intelligence, and health regen. So here we have a suffix, and again, you can kind of like chaos the suffix into maybe some resistance or maybe some health, so that any of that will be nice. And this is not really such a problem, but we see the prefixes here. We have a tier 4 int, not very useful for rogue, but we have a tier 2 attunement that we could try 3 times to roll into something better. So here we can also guarantee to make one of these prefixes into an experimental mod. This is only possible on gloves, boots, and belts. This is where experimental mods exist, but this can be a very helpful strategy as well to try to get rid of a certain mod that you don't like, or potentially even add something that can be really useful. Some builds actually really want those experimental mods. So what I suggest for this is this Tanklab Glyph of Insight tool here. So I'm gonna have this linked in the description, but it's here, lastepoch.tanklab.com. This has this tool here for Glyph of Insight. And basically what you can do is you can change a prefix into a certain deterministic experimental affix. And this depends on the exact item properties. So you have to select what we got here. So we have a tier 2, we have a tier 4 on the prefixes, and then we have the suffixes here. We have a tier 2 and a tier 6. And then we say, okay, there's no sealed affix, and this is a pair of boots, and it will tell you what you're getting after doing this. And you see here that the experimental affix will be haste after using a traversal skill and increase the effect of haste on you. So it's actually a pretty good one. I guess pretty much every build likes that. So this will be pretty nice. However, I almost just did the mistake of not including the forging potential, because that also plays a role. So you have to actually type the number of the forging potential here. So you see I have 39 forging potential left, and that actually also changes the affix. So now we actually have this minion teleport with you after using a traversal skill. So that's really good for some minion builds. In my case with Falconer, yeah, not quite, but especially the Necros love this. So it has also minion damage though, that's kind of nice. And it's something that at least is not useless for me. So in my case, I would go ahead and actually do this craft now. So here we use the Glyph of Insight that changes a prefix into an experimental affix. So we can do this here. We take the int and then boom. And you see here we got a tier 2 increased minion damage, and then minions teleport with you after using a traversal skill, which is exactly what this tool predicted. But now we got rid of this tier 5 mod there, and we can seal this thing away. So again, we can do, for example, the Glyph of Hope, and then we do Rune of Research. Rune of Research always seals, but it only works with experimental affixes. In this case, we do this, kapow, and it's gone. And now we, for example, we can craft the movement speed or whatever else we might be missing. So we can try the Glyph of Chaos here on the prefix, for example, and we got strength, and then we can try this again, we got movement speed. And in this case, I could go ahead and craft the dex now, for example. But you see here, we got kind of unlucky with the forging potential. This costs a lot here. So in this case, you would have to get somewhat lucky. But we can try this, for example. You got lighting res. And now we would, for example, do the dex here. And let's see if we get lucky and maybe get a crit or maybe get some Glyph of Hope procs. And here we go. Now, one other thing that I'd also like to do is that in the cases where I don't need to hit like certain breakpoints, for example, with the resistances. So, you know, let's say I'm just already fine on lightning res. And well, it's just about making the item a bit better with like more dex, more movement speed or so. You can also try to min-max the forging potential that is remaining by upgrading specific affixes. So when you craft lower tier affixes, you need less forging potential. I think like a tier 1 craft is like 1 to 12 forging potential, and then it becomes like 1 to 18 right now on a tier 3 craft, and then it goes up to like 1 to 24. So the higher tier affixes cost more forging potential. And for example, when you have very little forging potential left, it might not be such a bad idea to kind of like just craft the lower tier stuff on the item a little bit further. Until you get really close to running out of forging potential. So you see this here right now, I have 6 forging potential left. In this case, I would actually prefer to craft a tier 4 to a tier 5, because that gives you kind of the biggest bang for your buck. And well, if you run out of forging potential after this, so be it, that's the item. And maybe we get lucky and we get a crit. So we can see this here, and boom, you see I went from 6 to 0. It actually costs exactly 6, it says here. So you got kind of unlucky there. But at the very minimum, when you have just a tiny bit of forging potential left, it's not a bad idea to do this. In general, forging potential is quite the gamble, so sometimes you just run out in like 3 crafts and you can't do anything with the item, and other times you can craft like 12 different things and can make the most amazing thing. So that is always a bit up to RNG. And of course, you know, if you use stuff like the Glyph of Chaos, then well, it's also up to RNG. Or if you know, kind of like end up in a situation where you're trying to get a certain experimental mod, but you don't really have like exactly the prerequisites to get exactly the thing, well, yeah, it might also not be exactly what you want. But you can always try to manipulate this here, for example, with the amount of forging potential, for example, by upgrading one of these mods here. So let's say, you know, this tier 2 mod, we upgrade this to a tier 3, well, it remains the same. But let's say we have only like 25 forging potential left, it actually changes the affix. Now, one thing to note here is that this Glyph of Insight cannot actually drop, as far as I know. This can only be created. So in order to get Glyph of Insight, you have to use Rune of Research. So those can be found, and you have to use them basically on dropped exalted items from exiled mages. And when you do this, sometimes it will drop a Glyph of Insight on the ground as you craft. So you have to go pick it up then. So just make sure that, you know, as you grind out your character, you pick up those experimental items. And you don't have to do this like too much, but I do this like maybe a few dozen times or so per character. Just pick up a bunch of items and then have experimental mods on them. Use a research rune because you get many of them. And then like this, you can create Glyph of Insight. Now, finally, one of the most rare, actually I think the rarest rune is the Rune of Creation. So this is a bit resembling of the PoE mirror. It duplicates the item, but reduces the forging potential of both copies to 0. Now, when is that useful exactly? Let's start with that. Well, there are 2 real use cases for this. Number 1, you want to make an item that you use as a base for a legendary craft. So when you go to a Temple Sanctum and you use legendary potential, you can basically have 2 attempts at making such a craft. And if you have 2 unique bases, well, you can use 2 exalted items and then try and see what is the best outcome. And the other is, of course, to just make a copy of, for example, a really good ring or a really good one-handed weapon that you use in your offhand or in your ring in the other slot. However, that is probably much more rare. And potentially, I guess you can also like make a copy of a really good item to actually sell in the Merchant's Guild. So that would probably be an option as well. So those are the main use cases, I guess. And the first one is probably the most important one here. And I'm going to show you an example like that. So we have a bow here that I already started crafting a little bit, and this is an insane base for a legendary craft for a falconer, for example. So you can see my bow here for reference right now. I have bow damage, I have the crit attack speed hybrid, and I have the physical pen for the minions. So this is already extremely good with one of the exalted mods here. But then we have this bow. So this has the same mod, but just better with tier 7. So if I ever find like the 3 LP or a 4 LP talents again, then this will be the bow to craft. So this thing has 47 forging potential left. It has tier 3 of the Knight affix, tier 4 of the Knight affix, and an ultimate suffix because I sealed the other one away. And for legendary crafts, a sealed affix cannot be chosen. You can only choose the prefixes and the suffixes. So here I can craft whatever I want on the suffix, and if I have a 4 LP bow, I have the perfect legendary. So this is one of those cases where Rune of Creation actually makes a lot of sense, and we can also try this right now. So for example, we want to craft the last suffix here, which in this case would be the minion, melee and bow damage. So we do this a few times. And we see here, boom, and we can also do this here, for example. And well, it looks pretty good here. So we have the tier 7, we have the tier 5, and we still have 28 forging potential left. I actually ran out of shards here now, so I'd have to go and, you know, shatter some stuff. But I can make those tier 5 very reliably, and then I could use the Rune of Creation and make a copy. So we do this here. You have one Rune of Creation, and when you do this, I can actually just do it right now. Boom, you duplicate the item. It goes on your cursor like this. And, well, this goes down to 0 forging potential. So I just kind of ruined the item here for the showcase because it had a lot of forging potential left. So I should have done at least one more craft and then, you know, maybe roll the stats even if there's a bit of forging potential left. But when there's more than 0, you can make the copy, and then boom, you can have 2 attempts at, you know, doing like a 3 LP craft, for example, and you can just choose whatever is the better one if you also have that unique bow. So for example, this one here, if that was like a talents now with 3 LP, I could try to use it, and if it doesn't hit the right stuff, well, I can go again. And that also wraps up this video here. So I hope that you learned something and this helps you in your own crafting projects and the high end in Last Epoch. Personally, I had a lot of fun with the crafting system so far, and it's just really cool to try to use all these different tools available, try to be like smart about the decisions, like when to chaos, when to try to seal something, you know, when to maybe try to remove something. So there is always some RNG involved here, but trying to make the right choices, trying to, you know, either hit like more common affixes, for example, with the chaos, or trying to outright like, you know, just seal them away or remove them and then try and grab something else. And, you know, making these smart decisions with the forging potential is really important if you want to make the best out of your items. So I hope I can convey that, and hope you have good luck with your crafts yourself. I hope you liked this video, and see you guys next time.